Hey there, friend. Happy Wednesday. I hope that you are doing well wherever you are. I am coming in from Austin, Texas with a little bit of chamomile tea. So I hope you will do the same and let us know where you are coming in from and perhaps what is in your cup today. Big hi to Jim and Abba and Michael and Abdul and Shelby and Giacomo and Aaron and Kelly. We have already have such a great conversation going on. Over here in the chat, if you are unable to join us live, we will cry little tears for you. We'll play a little violin, but we get it. You're busy. You've got stuff to do. So if you are listening to this on your favorite podcast network while you fold the laundry or walk the dog or do the dishes, no worries. If you have questions about public speaking or about presentation skills, you can hit me up anywhere you want on any social media channel, and I will definitely dig into your question with you. But we are going to be digging into a lot of questions today and good conversations about this topic because boy, oh boy, this is by far what I get asked about the most. Howdy, Craig from Texas and Davisha. Great to see you joining us. Like I was saying, this topic, public speaking in general, I think it freaks people out, to be totally honest with you. It freaks them out. It makes them very uneasy. And I think it's twofold. One, we don't get a lot of experience with it, or rather, I can remember in elementary school or lower school, you might have to do like a book report. Like I read Catcher in the Rye over the summer and, here was my summary. But, so you kind of had to do it in like middle school, high school. You had to do like, a science fair presentation or a group project presentation in one of your classes. But then maybe in university, you kind of started to do them less. And then certainly once you got out of school and there was no one forcing you to do any sort of public presentations, a lot of people are like, whew, because I hated when my high school teacher made me do it. And now I don't have, Mrs. Schwartz breathing down my neck anymore. So I don't have to do that. Fantastic. Great. Escape all the things that I hate. And that is true. However, as we grow up, as we adult, as we climb the corporate ladder or want to start our own company or want to start freelancing or want to do a side hustle, you will have to present. You will have to present to your marketing team, to your sales team, to your boss to get that raise. If you're an entrepreneur or, starting a side hustle, you're going to have to get clients. You're going to have to present on those client calls. You're going to have to do this sort of public speaking that I know makes most of us, whether it is Michael or whether it is Kelly being like, I have PTSD from public speaking, we all have to do it. And so how do we do it in a way that is going to be productive, in a way that is going to be manageable, and in a way that we feel the most confident? Because I think that is the key. How do we feel the most confident while we are doing this? So I am going to dig into sort of my best tips and tricks and tactics, things that I've used when I went on Shark Tank, things that I've used when I've been doing pitches for clients or TV appearances or keynote presentations, just kind of my best tips. And these are probably going to be a little unconventional than what you typically hear, which you might typically hear like practice your speech. Actually disagree with that. So right off the bat, very contrarian, but I actually totally disagree with that. I don't think that you should practice 100 times. I don't think that you should try to memorize it. I think that makes you more stressed. And especially if you lose your footing, it makes you more panicked and anxious. So we're going to get into it, but here's how it's going to be a little differently. If you are here with us live, if you are like Michael and Liz and Brendan who are firing off things in the chat, I want you to contribute to this conversation. So ask your questions, give your best tips and advice. Push back on me. If you're like, wait, that doesn't make sense, Kim, explain more. I want this to be an active conversations between you and me. So that's where my mini workshops are a little bit different, but without further ado, let's kick it off. I love having an agenda. I love knowing what we're going to be doing. So this kind of gives you an overview. You've already met me. Check, check, check. We are going to go, I break down public speaking into 3 distinct categories. So those 3 distinct categories we're going to sink into. We're going to talk about some pre-speaking musts that are just before you even get to the point of doing any sort of presentation or public speaking. I just feel like you have to do these things before you even think about it. It's one of the things that I'm probably most bullish on. I'm going to talk about some sort of secret things that I do that I feel like it's just not commonplace that people are talking about that I think help a lot when it comes to public speaking. And then just sort of a mishmash of my favorite sort of tips and tactics. So I hope that you will lean in, that you will join me in this conversation and dig in as we cover one of the topics that probably brings people the most cringeworthy reactions, which is public speaking. But before we kick it off, I would love to know from you, what is sort of like the most common advice that maybe you've heard, or maybe that's been given to you when it comes to public speaking? And I'm sure there's one example that we're all thinking of that's probably the most common piece of advice, but I'm always curious because I always feel like there are different, especially because we have people joining us from all over the world, not just in the United States where I currently am, but all over the place. So I would love to know, especially kind of local to where you are as well, what is some of the advice that you are hearing kind of over and over again when it comes to public speaking? I just feel like it's one of the things that I always love to dig into. So Brendan says one of the things that he's heard time and time again is don't fear being judged. We also have Liz who's like, practice, practice, practice. Always a common piece of advice. Saranth is saying be prepared, which is totally true. Coming prepared is a huge part of this in a big, big way. A lot of people saying practice, which is true. You got to get the practice in, but how we practice, I think, is also probably the most important. So not just what we're practicing, but how we are actually practicing it. Jim is saying eye contact. That is a good one, or at least moving your eyes around the room. Nobody wants like the unblinking kind of death stare, deer in headlights. That is so true, Jim. We definitely want some blinking. We definitely want your eyes roaming around the room a little bit, making that eye contact. And I love this one from Ahmed, practicing in front of a mirror. I think that this is one of the best ones because I feel like that is just always a good way for you to see what you look like. So we're going to dig into that a little bit more for sure. But I love this piece of advice. This is one of my go-tos as well, is that you don't write a speech, but instead an outline of what you want to cover and what goals you want to accomplish. Again, I think this one is so huge just because, like I said, a lot of times when we practice things word for word, if you slip up and you miss one word, it might throw off the rest of your game. But if you have a general idea of the things that you want to cover, then you're less likely to be thrown off. So lucky for us, we're not all actors. It's not a Broadway play or a movie production where you have to know the script word for word. If you throw in an extra word or you say awesome instead of super, who's going to know the difference? Nobody. So as long as you have your goals on what you want to hit, that is huge. I am really surprised based on everybody who is contributing in the chat right now with what their best piece of advice is. I am surprised that nobody said what I think is the most popular, which is, oh, imagine the entire audience in their underwear. Do we not remember that piece of advice? Just imagine everybody in their underwear and what you would think about that. I think that is the worst advice. That's just disgusting. I don't want to imagine anybody in their underwear unless we're in a room full of, I don't know, models, maybe, or like people people that are in like an Abercrombie and Fitch catalog, maybe then I would imagine everybody in their underwear. That would probably make me more flustered, to be honest with you, surrounded by hot guys with like 8-packs. But whatever works. But I personally don't like the underwear advice. It's never been my favorite. So I don't encourage you to use it either. It's just like, as Michael said, that is a hard no from us. So like I said before, I really like to break up the whole idea of public speaking and giving presentations into 3 distinct parts. So into sort of the pre-speaking prep, into the actual speaking that you're going to be doing, and then the part that most people forget about is sort of like the post game, if you will. So what is happening after you give your speech, after you give that presentation? What is going on? So I think that that's really important to kind of think about breaking it up. So let's go into the first part first. Makes sense. First part first, which is the pre-speaking, and really focusing on how we can prepare ourselves before we give the actual speech. And I love this advice from Debash. I hope I'm saying that right. If not, you'll correct me. It says, turn your mirror practice into powerful feedback sessions with these tools like Veed, where you can record and review and refine your presentation. So again, great advice, great thing that you can do. Again, pre-speech, what are we doing before the actual day? So I think that that is an awesome way that you can prepare yourself. Watch back what you're doing, always a good thing. So let's talk about what you can really do in terms of red flags pre-speaking. One of my biggest red flags when it comes to speaking is leaving yourself with decisions the morning of. I just think that this is one of those things that it's going to make you stressed. It's going to leave you flustered, and it's not going to allow you the time and energy you need to focus on what you should be focused on, which is the presentation you're about to give. So morning of decisions, we need to eliminate as many of these as humanly possible. So what does that mean? That means we are already picking out the outfit that we're going to wear. And not only are we picking it out, this is where we're going like 10 steps ahead. Not only are we picking it out, we're trying it on. Because there's some of us who over the winter decided to add an extra layer of warmth. Okay? Some of us decided to add on some extra warmth that perhaps we didn't decide to take off. And so in your mind, you could be thinking purple dress, or in your mind, you could be thinking navy skirt, or in your mind, you could be thinking brown slacks. And you know what happens the morning of when you set it all out and you go to put it on? Did anyone see that skit where it goes fat guy in a little coat? Anyway, it was great. Great movie. Highly recommend. It was quite funny. And so anyways, we don't want to feel like a stuffed sausage. Do you know what I mean? So we got to try on our outfit way before, not just the night before, but like preferably like a week before. Make sure we feel comfortable. Make sure that we feel good. Also, not only are we trying on the outfit, preferably if you could practice in that outfit. Why do I say this? I'll use myself as an example. I had a dress that in my mind, I was like, yep, that dress is going to be great. I tried it on, it fit great. And then I decided to practice. Well, as you've probably noticed, I speak a lot with my hands. I use them a lot. And especially if I have a hands-free mic, then I am really using them quite a bit. And what I realized is in this specific shirt that I wanted to wear, as I moved around, the shirt would flutter. And it started to distract me because it was starting to ruffle against the chair I was sitting on or against the like podium. It made me realize that I would be distracted by that during the day. So again, if you can, try to practice in whatever outfit you intend on wearing. I know this sounds really a little psychotic probably and type A, But it's one of those things that I just know that if you feel confident going in and it's something that you feel comfortable in, and you're not going to be like, oh my gosh, am I sweating? Am I getting weird pit stains in this? Are my pants too tight? Are the buttons coming undone? Like, you just don't want that. You don't want that the day of. It's like Liz is saying, walk around in your outfit. Nothing is worse than realizing that the outfit does something weird while you are moving in it. So it's just, trust me, it's one of those things that it's just really going to help you as much as possible. Number two, I want you to really think about your travel routes and your options. So again, I will use myself as an example. When I was first starting my company and doing a ton of pitches and investor meetings at the time and new business clients, I would take the New York subway. That was what I used to get around. And what I would always do is I would say, okay, I'm going to take the orange line, the F train, the F for the M. But in my mind, I always said, okay, I'm going to leave enough time, because if for some reason the F line isn't running on time or is broken, what's my backup? I'm going to leave enough time that if I had to do it, I could get a cab. So just think about, what if there's traffic? What if you have to take an alternative route? What's your next plan of action? Plan all that beforehand. So again, on the day of, if you wake up and you walk out the door, you are not surprised by anything. You know, there's a traffic on the highway. No problem. I already thought about that. I already decided to wake up 20 minutes early, or I decided to get to the location early and have my coffee there instead of having my coffee at home. You know, whatever it is, like Erin is saying, you know, wake up at 7 a.m., you know, eat nutritious food, small amount of caffeine. Don't load yourself up with coffee that you have the jitters. You know, really think about that morning prep and how to set yourself up for the best success that you can. Again, our key is less decisions, not more decisions. So the more decisions that we can front load and make before this big presentation or before public speaking, the better. So again, I'll use this last example again from my personal life, because I think it's important. About 2 months ago now, my husband and I went to a wedding, and he was asked to give a speech at the wedding. And, you know, he had kind of written down the things he wanted to say about the groom and the things he wanted to say about the bride, and, you know, some little anecdotes and stories about them. But he really prepped himself by saying, okay, and we talked about this during the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding. He said, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to have one cocktail during cocktail hour, but then I'm not going to drink anymore until my speech is over. So again, he was already the day before pre-prepping. How is tomorrow going to go? How am I going to set myself up for success? Again, so that he would have less decisions the day of. That is really our main focus. The least amount of decisions that we can have is just going to be key. Another thing I want to focus on, I know it's a little much when it comes to specifically the outfit run through, is to really think about where you are wearing the outfit. So is this going to be in person? Is this going to be on screen? You know, it's similar to what Liz said. Is this something where you need to be able to move? Are you walking across the stage? You know, are you in front of a lot of people? Are you going to be sitting like I am right now? You know, really thinking about where is this going to live? Like, how am I going to look, and what does that look like? And I say that because, again, one of the mistakes that I see people make a lot is when they are on screen, they are wearing a printed pattern. You can see today I have a slightly printed pattern, but for the most part, it's a solid color. It's solid navy and solid white. You will notice now that I've shown this photo, and for anybody who's listening, I'm showing a photo right now that has about 6 screenshots of different people that you see on the news. And one thing that you'll notice about people, whether you turn on any major news network, is for the most part, they are wearing solid colors. It could be solid red or blue or green, but it is a solid color. And that is because the human eye, especially if they're looking at something on screen, really tends to get distracted by busy patterns. And typically, again, with the pixels on some people's webcams now, or feeds of their internet, anything that is too detailed. So let's say you had a bunch of flowers or something very intricate on a tie, it can tend to get a little fuzzy. So if you can, again, if you're in person, whatever, wear whatever you want, no worries. But if you are on screen, solids are a must, or as Michael is saying here, stripes are not good for video. Listen, I am not a technical wizard. I don't claim to be, but you can do your own deep dives on why this is from a kind of pixel and camera standpoint. But just know that that's the case. You really just don't want to wear no polka dots, no stripes, no anything with really delicate small patterns. As much as you can, solid colors, they're going to really benefit you no matter what on screen. And I should add, even if you're in person, but let's say you're going to be projected, let's say you're giving a keynote and half of the team is in person, but half the team is remote, or there's a jumbotron and you're going to be on, video as well as in person. Again, just something to think about with the screens and with the digital cameras. They like solid colors all the time. And again, if you guys have questions as I'm going through this, feel free to lean forward, get those finger typing and pop them in the chat, because we are going to go through them like in real time. We don't have to, leave it till the end. Speaking of, Giacomo asked this great question, which is, what if your audience is an online one? What are your best tips in that case? A lot of the tips are going to be the same, with the exception of, I'll give you 2 tips that are going to be specific to online. And those 2 tips are, number 1, you are going to want to make eye contact with your camera, not with the screen. So for instance, if I was looking at the screen, like in a Zoom call, my eyes would actually go here because that's where the picture is. But that's not where you are. You are here. So practice looking in the camera as much as possible. So again, that goes back to our prep about knowing what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. So if you're doing something online, as much as possible, straight into the camera. The second thing that I will say is, if you are presenting online, your gestures are going to have to be a little bit bigger. So for example, if you are in person and you like what somebody is saying, or somebody's asking you a question, you might do a small nod and maybe a small smile to say like, oh, great question, Giacomo. Like, please ask me another one. However, online, those small things, again, going back to people's cameras and the resolution and what they're able to see and how big your screen is for them, those can be hard to see. So if you're going to smile, instead of doing a small smile, kind of over exaggerated a little bit bigger. So if your normal, let's say, is at a 30%, if you're going to be presenting online, I needed to take that from a 30% to about a 50%. So everything needs to get a little bit bigger for any sort of online presentation, because the small things just aren't as noticeable. Great point. I'm glad we were able to dig into that, Giacomo. Now let's dig into actual speaking. So again, we've sort of covered my best tips when it comes to pre-speaking, but now I want to cover my best tips when it comes to speaking. But I think before we cover the best tips, I also just want to cover the ones where to me, they are red flags. They're like, just whatever you do, don't do these things. Because sometimes I feel like, sometimes it's hard for people to grasp best practice. Listen, it's hard for all of us sometimes to grasp best practices. Sometimes I just rather know, like, what do I not do? Don't eat raw egg, you're going to puke, than what all the things that you should be doing, just give me the worst case scenario. So, but before I tell you what I think, I'm going to tell you what I think no matter what. But before I do that, I'm curious from your point of view, what do you think distracts audiences the most? So when someone is giving a presentation, when someone is doing a formal keynote, what do you think distracts audiences the most? And I know this because, one, I've been in a lot of audiences and have been distracted. So I know from that standpoint. And then the reverse, I have been on stage many a times and I've seen the audience get distracted by, now I don't do this anymore, but I see it in terms of other people. But so it's not always by me, although sometimes it is. But really, I can see when people start to, you've seen it when somebody starts to lose the audience, right? They start pulling out their phones, they start checking emails, you're losing them. You're losing them. So I think that is really important. We don't want to lose the audience. Obviously, we want to keep the audience intact. So Shelby said, jangly earrings was one that comes to mind. Anything that makes a lot of noise. That is a no-brainer. Definitely distracts the audience, which is why we should practice our outfits the day before, for sure. Indecision during the presentation, or one of my favorites, always saying definitely can distract the audience. Spinach in your teeth. Surnath, you win for literally kind of like the best answer. Spinach in your teeth would definitely distract the audience, or perhaps make them pay attention even more. You never know. But I think one of the biggest things that distracts an audience is fast talking. What do I mean by fast talking? The human brain can only absorb so much information at a time. So you can't listen to something. Actually, biggest complaint, I don't know if anybody else has friends like this. My husband listens to podcasts sometimes on 2x speed, unhinged. I literally, it sounds like I can't, I'm like, how are you listening to that? 2x, what are they even saying? And by the way, he listens to news stuff. So it's talking about like politics and 2x. My definition of a nightmare. Politics in general, and then politics and 2x. It's a definite no for me. But the thing is, the human brain can only think about things so quickly. And so you really have to slow down what you're saying in terms of getting your audience a chance to catch up. And not only that, but when you are speaking or presenting, you have what scientists call an aroused brain, right? It's kind of like that fight or flight, like your adrenaline's going, you're like, all right, I'm on stage, here we go, I'm doing this speech, or, I'm at a wedding and I'm giving this toast, or I'm at the sales meeting and I'm presenting. So you're kind of on super speed. Your brain's like, woo, it's like jacked up on, 20 coffees. And so in your mind, you're speaking slowly, but in reality, you're not, because you're going at 100 miles an hour. You're like, woo, we are cruising. And you want to not do that actually as much as possible, because not only are you really hyped up, but you also know the material already. So going back to the example of my husband giving the speech at the wedding, he already knew the stories that he wanted to tell. He already knew the story he was going to tell about the bride. He already knew the story that he was going to tell about the groom. And if you were part of those stories, then the minute he started telling the story, you knew what he was talking about. Like, back when so-and-so was in college, there was the night of the big football championship. And if you were there, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that night. But there were a lot of people at the wedding who weren't there and were hearing the story for the first time. And so going through this story slowly helps them stay tuned to what you're talking about. Because if you start going through your story really fast, like a podcast on 2x speed, you've lost the audience, right? They start to sit back. They're like, I can't even follow this guy. He's going way too fast. I'm going to get out my phone. I'm going to start checking my emails. I'm going to see what's going on Instagram, because you just lost them. So like Aaron was saying, it can make the material that you're talking about unclear or just super vague, because again, you're going through the story or the material really quickly and other people are not even able to catch up. They're just like, whoa, how do we get here? What's going on? So I love Kelly's point here too about repeating bullet points on a screen, that some people think it could be annoying, but at the same time, like it takes them a minute to catch it. I totally agree. And you'll see a lot of times with people that are really wonderful at public speaking or really great that they will repeat themselves quite a bit. And so I always say study the people that you like to see. So again, using myself as an example, I really like public speakers like Brene Brown. I think she does a great job public speaking. I really like people like Malcolm Gladwell. I think he does a great job public speaking. Simon Sinek, great job public speaking. So whether it's Instagram or LinkedIn or YouTube, look up those people and see what they do. So what pace are they speaking at? How often are they pausing? How much time do they give the audience to catch up? Or in Kelly's amazing example, how often do they repeat themselves? Because people will repeat themselves, especially, by the way, if you're a fan of TED Talks or TEDx Talks, people repeat themselves constantly with this. And now that I've told you this and you start to watch these, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, they really are repeating themselves over and over again. And one of the most famous people that used to do this was Barack Obama. So I highly encourage you to go look at any video of him speaking publicly on YouTube. Barack Obama was famous not only for really distinct pauses in the speeches that he would give, but also repeating himself. So saying things like, we know that we have to represent the working man. But how do we represent the working man? This is how I think we represent the working man. So again, just repeating things kind of over and over in new ways, back to Kelly's point, but kind of drilling down so that your takeaway at the end of the speech was, wow, he's really covering the working man. It's sort of that subliminal messaging. Jeff is asking, and I'm curious for everybody else's thoughts on this as well. Is there an app or AI that you can use to measure how fast you are speaking or to practice with a timer? I love this. I'm sure this exists. I personally don't know of one. So all the more reason why I would love to hear from you guys if you have found something that is helpful in terms of helping you pace what you're doing and in terms of practicing with the timer, because I think that is huge, especially if you know, for example, that you have 30 minutes to do the marketing presentation, or you have 25 minutes to do your pitch idea, or you have 45 minutes to do a keynote. Jeff is so right. Staying on time, and you yourself staying on time, is crazy important. And again, really practicing as much as possible, staying on time can be helpful. Looks like we have one called Orai, ORAI.com. It measures pace, clarity, and filler words, which is really interesting. It gives instant feedback, and it is ideal for short daily practice sessions. So we'll definitely include that link in the show notes. Thank you so much for popping that one in. That is a great one. Now I'm going to cover post speaking. So we have sunk into what to do before our speech. We really kind of honed in on during the speech, slowing down, thinking about our pacing, thinking about how we're moving our bodies. But again, one of the areas that I see people make the biggest mistake is they finish speaking and they say to themselves, the work is done. Hand me a margarita. Time to party. Get the croissant. Get the piece of cake. Hand me that chocolate. Let's go. I'm done. And the truth of the matter is, you are not done when you are done with that presentation, when you are done with that keynote, when you are done with that online presentation, because you need to review what you just did. So if anybody likes sports, whether it is football or soccer, or football, which is soccer everywhere but the United States, You know that coaches and teams do this all the time. So after the game, they, wait a day or two and they all come in with a big screen and the coaches sit there and, I imagine them like licking their finger with a pen and being like, all right, Giacomo, here's, you should have zigged, but you zagged and we lost that. You should have kicked with your right foot, not with your left foot. And they go over notes of what you could have done better or what that person could have done better. And you need to do the exact same thing with yourself. So you need to watch whatever you just did again. Bonus points if they already recorded it, that would be great, but you need to watch yourself again. And by the way, if you know that they're recording you and you ask for a copy afterwards, say, hey, I would love to review how I did. Can I get a copy of that? Or beforehand, say, are you recording this? If they say no, ask, could I record it? So that's another idea. So ask, like, could I record it? That would be super helpful for me. And I want you to think about doing this in two ways. So when you watch yourself back, I want you to watch it with the sound on, but no visuals. So again, I want you to close your eyes or black out your screen or whatever it is, and just listen to the sound. So going back to Jeff's question earlier, I know listening to yourself is like nails on a chalkboard, but I want you to hear, how quickly did you speak? How many ums did you have? How many times were you able to repeat a point and really emphasize it? And don't get distracted by what you're seeing. Really close your eyes and focus on what you're hearing. And then do the opposite. So turn your presentation on mute or turn your keynote on mute and literally just watch yourself. Were your hands flailing too much? Ladies, did you play with your hair a lot because you got nervous and you didn't know what to do with your hands? Did you move that eye contact? Did you move to other people that were in the room instead of just a dead stare? Or again, if it was an online, were you making eye contact with the camera instead of down at the screen? So really sink into that review and see what you're doing, because I think that reviewing what you do is also just so important. And it's especially important because you always want to improve. And you especially want to improve if this isn't something that comes naturally to you, which I don't think it comes naturally to a lot of people. Certainly didn't come naturally to me. So I think practicing it is always a good move. And I love Michael's question here, which is, how do you present as an extrovert if you are actually an introvert? And I think so much is not necessarily presenting like an extrovert or presenting like an introvert, but really presenting information in a way that you feel confident. And I know a lot of introverts who hate public speaking, absolutely despise it. But you know what? When it's their turn to get up and do a presentation, they nail it. They nail it. You would never know that they were nervous. You would never know that they didn't just come up with this off the cuff. And it's because they've prepped themselves in the right way. It's because, again, going back to that wedding speech idea, they know what they're going to talk about, or they know those marketing numbers, or they know those sales numbers like the back of their hand. You can say, what are the Q3 sales projections? They already know because they did the upfront work. They didn't just memorize a script and then not really think, okay, well, what happens if I get questions on this script? No, they honestly know the material and they can dig into the material in a really authentic way. And I think that that makes a huge difference. And to the question about being an ambivert, I think that this is a great term. And for anybody that doesn't know what that means, it means that you really, while you can be social, you really recharge by yourself, which makes total sense. And it, again, I think we can all, to some degree, kind of fake it till we make it in some ways, where we can say to ourselves, okay, I know I've done the prep work. I know what I'm going to say. I know what's going on. And I feel confident that I've done what I needed to do before this big event, before this big speech, before this big presentation, that I know that I'm going to knock it out of the park. And I think that that's really just something that we all can do and continue to do. Again, whether it's in our work lives, like in the example I gave of going to a sales meeting or a marketing meeting, or in our personal lives, like the example I gave of the wedding toast. So it's something that we can use no matter what. And I think will help us in all cases. Also, for anybody who wants to keep digging in further to kind of all things presentations, I have a free resource and it is called Sharing Your Expertise Online. But even though it's sharing your expertise, it does give a lot of presentation like info. So it's totally free. You can head to linkedinlearning.com and we'll include a link in the show notes as well and in the chat. But it's a free resource. It's still helpful if you want to kind of refresh yourself or send this to a friend that wasn't able to join, or, toss it over to a coworker that is like really freaked out about it. I think that that's always super helpful. I also like this point from Jeff that I want to touch on, which is creating a persona of yourself that, loved public speaking. And there are really famous examples of this. So if anybody has read, this was like probably 10 years ago, Beyonce did an interview and she said, I am Beyonce, but what you actually see on stage is this fictional character that I've created called Sasha Fierce. And that is sort of my stage persona. Or another person that's very famous for doing this is Lady Gaga. So Lady Gaga will say, if you meet me on the street, I'm actually Stephanie. But when you see me kind of in the meat dress and, these crazy outfits and on stage, that's Lady Gaga. That's like this alter ego that I have created that, is fearless and avant-garde and, totally wacky and out of the box. But that's not necessarily me on a Tuesday home in my pajamas. And so I think Jeff's point is important here, that it could be helpful for you. So again, we're all about trying these different tips and tricks and tactics to see what works best for us. Because again, what works for me might not work for you. And what works for you might not work for me. So we kind of have to try on all of these different tips and tricks to see which one feels right for us. So I'm glad Jeff brought this up, because this is a strategy that I think works really well for a lot of people, where they kind of, maybe they play a song. Again, if anybody loves the Olympics like I do, you will notice that a lot of those Olympians, Michael Phelps was famous for it. He would always have his headphones on before he hit the pool deck. And you can see, again, sports players, when they're coming into the stadium, they have their headphones on, they're kind of their pump up music as they start to transform into this other character, into this Olympian, into this sports athlete, or in Jeff's example, into this person that loves public speaking, that loves giving presentations, when, on a day-to-day standpoint, maybe that's not so much the case. Maybe it's not something that we actually want to do all the time, but having that is really helpful. Also, Liz wants to dig into what are some tips for impromptu speeches? Any tips on how to be prepared when you actually can't prepare? This is a good one as well, because sometimes, again, you are asked at the last minute to, can you give a toast to the birthday boy? Or at work, your boss is sick. Can you sub in for the marketing meeting? And all of a sudden now you're doing a presentation that you hadn't planned on. So what are some tips when things are impromptu, when you got to really think on your feet? I have two things that I think work really well. Number one is being honest, and being honest up front. Because listen, people want to feel like they're in on the joke. People want to feel like, okay, we're all part of the same team. So I think simply addressing it, whether you're getting up in the marketing meeting and going, well, guys, it's great to be here. Not going to lie, I didn't know I was going to be here 20 minutes ago, but Marsha got sick, so you got me. And everybody in the room kind of laughs, and then they kind of know, oh, okay. And they also give you the benefit of the doubt and some gratitude, really, of like, wow, thank goodness that Liz stepped in, because if Marsha was sick, we just might not have heard what was going on with marketing at all. So it kind of gives people a little bit of grace and a little bit of empathy towards you. Or again, in terms of like that birthday boy speech, you could get up and say, I'm super excited to toast the birthday boy. Not going to lie, would have been more excited to toast him 2 days ago when I had time to come up with the speech, but hopefully you guys will bear with me. Again, gives the audience the opportunity of like, wow, Liz is standing up at the last minute and giving this birthday speech. So again, number one, just kind of making people aware of the fact that you are in this sort of like pinch hitter situation. I think that that's really helpful if you're doing anything impromptu. And secondly, really keeping in mind, if you're doing anything impromptu, that less is more. Less is more. I would rather you say less. I would rather it be short and sweet than long and rambly. So some people, when they're doing something impromptu and they haven't practiced, and all of a sudden it's what I call like diarrhea of the mouth. They just, blah, 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 blah. It's just, they're going on, and you're sitting there and you're like, oh, wrap it up, Jim. Nobody wants to hear about your baseball stories with the birthday boy. Wrap it up. Just short and sweet. Less is more. If you're in a corporate setting and people have additional questions, and you don't know the answers to those questions, you can always say, that's really great. I will get back to you with the answer on that. And so I think that that's really important. So again, just keeping in mind that when you're doing something impromptu, you have to know that you want everybody to know that it's impromptu, and that you also just want to keep it as sweet and short as you possibly can. I think that that's really helpful. Another question here is, what is the approach between a proposed speaking and a proposal, like a pitch, something that you're doing for work, and let's say you're speaking at a conference, you're giving like a keynote? I would say a lot of the preparation tips are exactly the same. And in some cases, you might say like, well, Kim, geez, if I'm just doing an internal sales presentation, I don't think I have to pick which route I'm going to work. And that might be true. But I'm type A. I am a perfectionist. And I'm the type of person that I feel better when I'm over prepared. I feel better when I don't have necessarily a plan B and a plan C, but I have like until a plan E. I have like all the plans. Like that helps me feel more confident. So I would rather over prepare than under prepare. So a lot of that, whether you are doing just like a simple sort of like internal presentation for your corporate team, or if you're doing something on stage in front of 200 people, I would actually keep a lot of the prep the same, which is probably a little controversial because people are probably like, that's total overkill. And maybe that is, but to me, it would make me feel better that way personally. So I would say actually, I think a lot of the prep would be exactly the same. The only other thing that I would say is, and actually this is true whether you're doing an internal corporate presentation or you're doing something more, in front of all the baseball coaches for Little League, or you're doing it in front of a conference audience, is if you can plant one or two work friends or kind of work colleagues or somebody in the audience to ask questions. So sometimes when you get done with these speeches or conferences or presentations, naturally the person goes, okay, well, that's it for the sales team's report for the rest of 2025. Happy to take any questions. And then we all know what happens. It is crickets. You hear nothing. You could hear a pin drop. And then what happens to you, the person on stage or the person giving the presentation, is you start to get nervous. Or if you're like me, you start wringing your hands and you start going, okay, where are the questions? Why does nobody have any questions? I'm just standing up here. I'm just presenting up here. And you start to kind of have this internal panic. And for a lot of us, again, including me, I wear that internal panic on my face. So you see the internal panic. So it really isn't just internal because it starts to become external. You start to get the whole like, any questions? Is there no questions? No, we're good. We're okay. It's just like a horrible feeling. So I always tell people if you have one or two people that you can kind of plant in the audience to say, hey, I'm going to wrap up at around whatever, 30 minutes. I time myself. That's what I'm going to do for the sales update, or that's what I'm going to do for this marketing presentation. If nobody asks a question off the bat, can you raise your hand or can you drop into the Zoom chat this question? Because I think it's a pretty common one and I want to address it. And normally what happens is once one person asks a question, it's like a tornado. Then all of a sudden the winds start going and everybody starts having questions. But you kind of need that first initial push to really get the ball rolling. So that would be my one piece of advice is if you can kind of plant little question askers in your audience, I think that would be extremely helpful. What is the best practice before delivering a speech or a presentation? Should you do any sort of warm up? I have two tips for this that I think work really well. And that is you need to be awake for at least 2 hours. And trust me, a couple weeks ago, this is crazy. I was doing a hosting event for a big Fortune 500 company. And I was the global host of this worldwide event that they were doing. And I had to be on the sound stage at 6 a.m. Had to be on the sound stage at 6 a.m. Ready to go, by the way. Like hair and makeup done. I had to be in hair and makeup at 5, actually, and ready to go at 6. I got up that morning at 3:30. Why? Because I wanted to have a voice that was strong. I wanted to have a voice that could project. And a lot of times I call it the morning voice, the kind of croaky, like, good morning. Like you've heard people when they're first waking up, didn't want that. So I think you need to be up at least 2 hours before you give a speech. And the second thing I will say in terms of a warm up, if you can do anything, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, maybe it's a couple jumping jacks, maybe it's a couple push-ups, maybe it's a little bit of a walk around the block. I think it's only natural. And by the way, I've done hundreds of speaking events at this point, and I still get the jitters. So I think it's pretty universal that kind of we all get the jitters. So even if you can do a little walk around the block to kind of, move your body, my dad used to call it like crazy dance, like you kind of just want to get as much as those jiggles and wiggles out of your body as humanly possible. So wake up early, get a little bit of physical movement in. I think it's just helpful to kind of get all that. You're not going to get all the nervous energy out. Trust me, it will still be there, but you can at least feel like you get some of it out. Some of those wiggles and jiggles, you can kind of get out of your system a little bit. I think that's super helpful. By the way, these questions are so great. I'm loving them. I feel like it's really helpful when we all kind of share these tips and tactics and things that are helping all of us. I know that I'm going to have a ton to look up in my notes afterwards because there's great resources that are being shared here. So I think that's so helpful. But again, just to kind of recap a little bit, I think as much as you can practice in front of a video, get that outline for yourself to feel confident, do some of the pre-work, do some of the post-work. I think it's just really going to help you and be helpful as you start to think about presenting in a more meaningful way. I tend to post quite a bit about presentations, about public speaking, about sharing your knowledge, about sharing what it is that you do. And the only way that I know that you can get that information, no matter what, is to click the follow button. We have had several people lately who have written in and said, I didn't know about this session, or can you send me the link, or I'm so mad I missed it. And I'm so mad you missed it too. But LinkedIn's algorithm is changing all the time. Fun fact, actually, let me know in the chat if you saw this. I noticed this a couple weeks ago. but there wasn't really a time to bring it up because we've had guests every single week, but now I'm alone, so I can bring it up. And that is, I'm going to open up my phone right now so that I'm going to try to show you if you're live, but if you're not, have you noticed now that on the, I don't know if it's on the desktop version, but it's definitely on the mobile version of LinkedIn, similar to TikTok, there's a For You page versus the people that you're following page. I would love to know because, again, I'm in the United States, so I never know. A lot of times LinkedIn will roll things out in pieces. So they'll like roll it out to Europe first, but then they'll roll it out to Australia, but then like eventually it'll get to the US, or sometimes it goes the other way and they roll it out in the US and then they roll it out in Europe. So I don't know if this, by the way, this is a total rip on TikTok, which I guess is fine, but whatever. So I say all that because now that and by the way, it defaults to the For You page. And I noticed this because a couple weeks ago when I was looking through my feed, I was like, who is this person? And I kept saying that several times. I'm like, why am I seeing, like, I don't even follow this person. This is a stranger. And then I figured out, oh, it's the For You tab. It is who LinkedIn is pushing me, which is great, I guess, from a discovery platform. But a lot of times, like, I want to see you guys. Like, I want to see who I'm connected to. Like, I want to see who I'm following. I don't necessarily want to see strangers from the internet. So again, that following button, Giacomo's saying in Italy, we don't have it yet. Again, Shelby is saying also that she had not noticed this. So again, maybe they're just rolling it out. Maybe it's like a test and it's just being rolled out, I don't know, for certain accounts in certain countries. I don't know. But all that to say, I'm going to double down on saying, like, please make sure that you have the follow button clicked because that's the only way I know how this works. Other than that, I have no control. And, it is what it is. Liz is saying she's not seeing it. So maybe also look on mobile. I'm wondering if it's not on desktop too. But anyways, all I say, make sure you hit the follow button because I can't control it. I don't know how to make sure that you get this content. Next week, I'm really excited about our coffee guest. We are going to have Miles Croft with us. And it's kind of building on everything we talked about today about presentations, about presenting yourself, because it's all about sales. But what I really love about him is he's all about using honesty instead of kind of very like snake oil salesman, kind of tricky tactics that you just think, oh, like, why do the sales guys have to be so cringy? So I love the way that he approaches sales because I feel like it's something that we're all kind of presenting and selling something. Maybe it's our ideas, maybe it's ourselves, maybe it's our marketing team's projects, maybe it's our sales team's projects, whatever it is. So I think it'd be super helpful. But if you want to join us next time, you can go to getcoffeewithkim.com. We will send a calendar invite straight to you. This has been so much fun and so helpful. If you enjoyed it, share it with a friend, pass it on, or write in and let us know what you thought. We love your feedback. We love all your thoughts. Until then, I will see you in a few short weeks when we sink in and talk with Miles. Until then, have a beautiful rest of the week and a wonderful weekend, my friend. And I'll see you soon. Bye.